Hello and welcome to a new chapter of our next adventure. We're still in Nepal, and our next stop was Pokhara. So Pokhara is a smaller town than Kathmandu, I suppose more tourist oriented. Well, one of the things we noticed right away as soon as we arrived and were shuttled to our hotel was we were driving through a town, which was very Kathmandu-like, but at 50% speed. And then we passed sort of, not a fence or a barrier of any kind, but there was a section where there was a sign that said tourist area ahead, and it had a little outline of a law enforcement officer. And so we asked about that, whether this was for tourists only, and it's not, everybody's welcome, but it was very clearly no longer a local, everyday business area. It was pretty much exclusively restaurants, exclusively hotels. It was on the lakeshore.
Souvenir shop.
Well, we went on a city tour. So our guide took us on a city tour. Patricia, what do you remember from that?
So the city tour pretty much consisted of these underground caves that I had no idea existed. Of course, the guidebook itself did allude to these bat caves and whatnot. Very interesting getting down into them. The one cave in particular had a shrine in it.
Well, both of them. There were two caves, and they were religiously
they were
significant.
different shrines.
Yeah, but they were religiously significant to Hindus, I believe.
Hindus.
And so I would liken the caves to, when somebody burns toast and it's in the shape of Jesus, and some people get really excited. To me, the caves were like that, and it's not disrespectful, but the reason they were sacred was there was a rock that had looked like an elephant trunk, and therefore it was Ganesh. And so it's deeply significant to people if you believe, and if you don't, then it's a rock that looks like
an elephant trunk.
Yeah. So there were two caves. One was Ganesh. One was Vishnu. Yeah. And so we got to see some caves. We also got to see some waterfalls, the Davi's Falls.
Yes, Davi's Falls, which was really interesting and famous too, because there is a story behind that, and that is one fellow pushed the other one over.
Yeah, there's a bit of folklore on that. I happened to read a bit more in our guide afterwards, and there's some debate whether it really happened, whether it was a lady named Davi, whether it was a boy named David. But regardless, the falls, we are here in February, water level's low. The falls are okay, not spectacular. We're told that in high season you'd be fighting crowds of over 500 people, but the water level would be higher, so I'm not sure if that would be any more spectacular. To me, the falls and the caves were worthwhile because there were no lines. I couldn't see myself fighting a crowd of 500 people to take a look at these falls, so they were okay if you're in the off season. In the on-season, you can decide for yourself whether you want to see them. We also got to see the military museum.
Yes, the Gorkha Museum.
Yeah, the Gorkha soldiers.
Gorkha soldiers.
Yeah, so the Nepalese fighters have been famous for over 200, 300 years. They were drafted into the British military after a battle between the British and the Nepalese, in which case they found a huge respect for these fighters. We spent a surprising amount of time in there. It's certainly not something I would have picked off the list, but we did spend a surprising amount of time in there. Across the street from that was the gorge. Again, it's a mountain river that runs through the town.
Now, what's really unique about this gorge itself is the watercolor. It's white, so it's different, because at first you think, wow, what has made it this color? And I asked the guide, and he said, well, it's because it comes direct from the mountains. There was a bucket that was suspended from one of the railings, so we got a chance to just test it, see for ourselves, and feel quite refreshing on a warm, sunny afternoon. And there was another fellow who asked what country you were from, and of course he had a picture of
at every one of these stops,
Canada.
whether it's the bottom of the cave, whether it's the bottom of the waterfall, whether it's the gorge, at the end of the gorge, somebody is offering you a blessing or trying to sell you a little statuette, which is to be expected, but they're not overly aggressive. And then the final thing was the Hindu temple at the top of the hill. And that was, we kind of lucked out. There was a wedding ceremony that happened there, so not only did we get to see the temple itself, as well as the practitioners and the worshippers, but there was also a bit of a hullabaloo.
For those of you who are not familiar with a Hindu-type wedding, so they do have a band with the loud horns and drums that typically play out in front of the bride and groom procession, and the bride and groom were right there in the temple itself, I guess, and we did witness some of the exchange of vows, the exchange of gold, which
but there were some other devotees too. The guidebook says on Saturdays there are the potential of animal sacrifices, so I'm not sure if that's your thing, but you might want to go on that day. But anyways, that's Pokhara, but that's not the extent of Pokhara, because there's still that whole touristy side of things. We saw signs for a jazz festival. We saw signs, when we were there was a paragliding festival. We saw signs for a Taekwondo festival. There was a finish line set up for a 10K run of some kind. So there's certainly a lot going on in Pokhara. And then in addition to that, the adventure sports, it seems to be the hub for mountain biking, paragliding, zip lining, rafting.
I'm glad we went just to see the difference in areas. Of course, in Nepal itself, we were entertained with a paragliding, 30-minute paraglide with different pilots, of course tandem, thank goodness. But we had watched the World Championship the day before from a patio rooftop when we had lunch, so watching some of them up in the air. And then the following day, both Chris and I had our own paraglide, which was quite spectacular, actually, to be that height and just to feel what it's like to soar like a bird.
Yeah.
Basically, the different air currents and circling around. And surprisingly, the landing was much more graceful than what I had anticipated, because I was a little nervous about the landing itself, but it basically land 1 or 2 steps, paraglide goes over, and then that's it. You're done.
Yeah.
Yes.
But what would you say is like Pokhara?
Well, there's something for everybody here. I will say that. So you've got your Annapurna trekking. You've got your, there was a jazz festival that had also just started the night we were here. Varying draws of interest in sports and adventure.
And the nightlife. We went for a walk at night. Every restaurant in this touristy area had a live band.
Yeah, cultural shows. Yeah. Anyway, that was Pokhara.